is maybe unethical, but he understands people, and he understood that about people, and he did use it, and it worked. So, yeah. Documentation is 50% of the job. This used to drive me insane because I now work for myself, so I don't work for a company anymore, but when I did work for a company, I would spend 80% of my time coming up with new ideas for brands and for messaging. And now this is a lot of brain power, and it's a lot of heart and soul. So it's writing radio ads, and it's writing TV, and it's writing messaging, and it's thinking of all the messaging come together, and you come up with a great campaign, and it's beautiful, and you implement it. And then I must go and talk about the campaign, because if I don't talk about it, no one will know that it happened. And I've learned this the hard way, where, you probably don't deal with awards, but in our industries we deal with awards, and we have to win awards in order to win new business. So there's this endless pressure to win awards the whole time. And my role, part of my role, was to collate all the information and to tell everyone about what we've done in order to win these awards. And it just drove me insane. It's like boiling an egg, and then you spend next 3 days talking about the egg boiled. But it gets people understanding, it gets people to see it. Someone might only see a poster of your campaign or your cause, but when they can see the whole thing put together, then they can really understand. So if they just see a poster, if they see a THC or HIV positive poster, and then they go and Google it because they're kind of a little bit unsure, and they do see the whole thing in all its glory, there's a lot more impact for your messaging. So. And just on that, it doesn't have to be the real thing when you document. You can use artistic license, I think. The selectivism word gets thrown around a lot, but we call it life badging, where everyone has started to build their own brand, and they do that through using other brands and pieces of information. So I want you all to know that I'm not just some chick in heels with a dress on. I'm actually quite deep. So I might throw out the fact that I read Nietzsche, and I really didn't like Jonathan Franzen's last book because it was so wordy. So that's what badging is. When you throw things out there to make people understand who you are. And a really easy way to do this is by using brands, and by being in the digital space, and by liking Facebook pages. So by me liking Kony 2012, I'm telling the world that I'm socially conscious. I care about the children in Uganda, and I'm not just like some dumb chick, So use that though. If nobody wants to be the dumb idiots who aren't conscious anymore, we do want to care. We do want to get involved. As I speak for the general public now, but you need to help us, show us how. And if that does mean paying 35 Rand for a poster or whatever, that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Or just liking a Facebook page. I haven't spoken a lot about how to use Facebook and Twitter and things like that because, a good idea shouldn't sit in any of those mediums. What happens inevitably if an idea is really good, it jumps out of all mediums and it kind of gets out into the real world. In a marketing sense, we never ever do anything just in the online space. We never just really start chainmail campaigns or just an app. We always ground it in some kind of real life event or activation or consumer experience that has a real world element. Because if it just lives online, it dies quickly. You might get traction, but it also won't have any real meaning. It won't have a reason to be relevant to people. So always look at a real life element. Never stop the marches, for example. Yeah, there's no such thing as a good idea, only a relevant one. And this is what advertising creatives say to themselves over and over, because we have to think of a million different ways to say something. And if we think of 1,000, 999 will be rejected. So it's not because ideas are bad or because a cause is bad or whatever else, but the relevance of something can really make or break it. We've just come out of a dictator-destroying era. We got Bin Laden, Gaddafi's down, Mugabe's on his way out, and here came Kony, and he was hurting the children. So the time was right for us to get really excited and upset about something like this, even though it wasn't even real anymore. So always look for a way to make it relevant to our time, as the times we live in. And don't be ashamed to write popular culture either. You know, if someone like Paris Hilton, for example, can somehow better your cause, because you know for whatever reason, because she contracts HIV, you know, if she becomes a springboard that you spring off, then so be it. But always try and find a relevance, because often is what launches you into any kind of conscious sphere in the first place. And that's my talk.
Thanks very much, Alex. So Zaki is going to not directly respond to that, but build on that for 10 minutes. Zaki, 5 to 10 minutes. And then we're going to open up for some questions. So, yeah.
So I'm a little sleepy, so you have to excuse me. I want to talk about 3 things very quickly. No, it's not going to be quick, but it will be between 5 and 10 minutes. The first thing is I'm going to speak a little bit about the Arab revolutions. The second thing is I'm going to say something about media and social media in building movements and revolutions. And the third thing I'm going to do is talk about what we can do now in South Africa and what we need to do. So the first thing I want to speak about in relation to the Arab revolutions is we learned that Arab people are human beings for the first time, because our image throughout the world was of Arabs as terrorists and Muslims being mad. And that was the image that the media had before. But the way in which the Arab revolutions made Arab people human, and it would never have happened without social media. It would never have happened without social media. So when Muhammad Bouazizi in Tunisia, he was a street vendor, but he was selling vegetables on the side of the road. But he had a degree and he couldn't find a job, and the police were demanding bribes, and all sorts of things terrible happened to him. And eventually he just had enough, and he set himself alight and he burnt to death. And there was an uprising in Tunisia. And within a month or so, they had got rid of one of the worst dictators in Africa. The people just got angry because Tunisia had helped America torture people in their country. They killed people. In detention, there was no free press. The leader was in power for 30 years or out, and so on. But as this happened, Tunisia is a small Arab country. And that started in December 2010. But what then happened is this shifted to Egypt. And in Egypt, a different thing happened. There was a man called Khalid Said. I keep on forgetting his name. Khalid Said. And I really believe that Ndifuna Ukwazi needs to do a Khalid Said lecture every year in which we talk about social media. And what happened to that man is the police beat him to death. And someone captured it on their cell phone. And they put that onto the media. They put it onto the web. And everyone saw it. Now what had happened 2 or 3 years before in Egypt is there was a workers' campaign. Now you'll remember that Egypt is the largest Arab country in Middle East and North Africa. It's the largest Arab country with over 80 million people. And in Egypt, they had the worst of the Arab dictators, Mubarak. And he's the worst in the sense that he gets $1 billion a year. He used to get $1 billion a year from the Americans to maintain dictatorship and control over his people because Egypt supported Israel. So Mubarak put loads and loads and loads of people in jail. He banned the Muslim Brotherhood. The only political party that really was allowed to exist was the National Democratic Party, which was his party. He'd been in power for 30 years and so on. So when Khalid Said died or was killed, there was a group called the April 6 movement. And a young girl from the April 6 movement developed, I can't remember her name now, she did a personal appeal, a video appeal on Facebook. And she put it up on Facebook. And at the same time, the head of Google in Egypt, Wael Ghanim, he put up a page, a Facebook page, We Are All Khalid Said. And that page has millions and millions and millions of likes. And it became the place for starting, when they said they're starting they're going to have a demonstration on the 25th of January in 2011, they expected a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000 people to come to the demonstration because they get beaten very badly, they get put in jail, they get tortured and so on. And 10,000 people came. And the police reacted badly, and the next day 100,000 people came. And the way they distributed their messages, this was young people organizing. And the way in which they distributed their messages was through their cell phone, through Facebook, through Twitter. Those were the main ones, huh? Cell phone messages, text, SMSs, Facebook, and Twitter. Now I'm going to give you some statistics about this, and this data comes from a report called the Arab Media Influence Report, or AMIR 2011. And just to give you an idea, the Middle East and North Africa has 65 million internet users. 65 million, right? That means part of Southern Africa, almost everyone is on the internet in the Middle East and in North Africa. Not everyone there is on the internet, but it means if you imagine South Africa, everyone in South Africa is on the internet. That would be the idea. 80 million they expect by 2012. That's now. 30.8% of the population. 30.8% of the population is on the internet, and it's higher than the global average, which is just about 28-29%. The user growth between 2000 and 2010 went up by 1,000%. And in the Middle East and North Africa, there are 17 million Facebook users. And one of the things to remember is that the fastest growing language on Facebook is Arabic. So the fastest growing language on Facebook is Arabic. Now what happened? You must remember that Twitter, Facebook, and all these things can be used for all that sex talk that goes on, the girlfriends that you talk about, and so on. So that's all the conversation that goes on. And like everyone tells me when they've gone to church, and then the next day they drink themselves to a stupor and so on. So, you know, I have some friends who tell me how drunk they get, and then they tell me they've been to church. So that's how people use the internet. But what essentially happened is that there's good and bad that you can do with the internet and social media generally. And Alex gave a very good thing of how people can use it badly. You can use it badly, but the very important thing to remember is you can use it for revolution and for change, but you can also use it can also be used to repress, to watch, and so on. So the internet, the CIA monitored all the tweets that were coming out of Egypt, as did this marketing company. They both did it. And the CIA wanted to see, of course, what was going on. But this Egyptian company, or this Middle East company that did it, looked at 10 million, the 10 million Twitter and Facebook conversations every day in the Middle East and North Africa. And they monitored those 10 million for a month. or a period of 3 months. And what they found is that in January, when the Egyptian revolution began, there were 1.6 million people talking about Egypt across the Middle East and North Africa, or sending messages to say, come, go to this, or go to that, or go to the next thing. And by February, that had doubled to 3.3 million people talking about. So in 1 month, the number of conversations on the internet about Egypt and its revolt doubled. Now, I'd explain to you what happened in relation to Khalid Said, but let me make 2 other points before I speak about how they monitored and how this changed. In 2010, 57% of conversation among Arab people, 57% of conversation on the internet was about salary, income, jobs, minimum wage. They were all socio-economic, housing, corruption, and police brutality. So the political conversation on Twitter and so on in the Middle East in 2010 was all about social and economic grievances. In 2011, the political conversation became corruption, Mubarak, minister, National Democratic Party, parliament, freedom, and revolution. That is what the conversation became changed into. So 80% of conversations in 2011 that mentioned Egypt, 80% of them started mentioning revolution, change, and getting rid of Mubarak. And that shows you how powerful the media can be. Now I'm going to ask a question. How many of you are on Mixit here? Yeah. Mixit is the single largest platform in Africa. Single largest platform in Africa, and it's a South African created thing, which we really need to also take seriously. But we can come back to that. 2 points about the Arab Revolution. 2 points about it. Is it was led by young people, and in Egypt, when the elections came, now you have to know, Egypt is a country with 80 million people, and about 30 million people voted. In the elections, only 1 million people voted for revolutionary change. 29 million people voted against the revolutionary parties. They voted for the Muslim Brotherhood, and they voted for the very reactionary Islamists called the Salafists. And now the Twitter conversations is shifting to how do we stop the Brotherhood, or how do we stop the Salafists, and so on. But what that shows us is that it is not enough because the Twitter class, and I use that very, very advisedly, in Facebook class, was mainly young middle class people. They were not the kids in the slums. The kids in the slums got their message through the mosque. So, as Alex pointed out, your campaign should never have only one area of focus. It shouldn't only be on Twitter. It shouldn't only be on Facebook. It shouldn't only be in the city. It should be as far on different platforms, but most importantly, I'm going back now to old days in revolution, and then I'm going to go to current days. How many minutes do I have? 3? 5. Okay, so the first place I want to start is that not many of you would know the name Lenin or the name Kautsky or even the name Marx, Karl Marx. But it was indispensable for the modern socialist movement to have newspapers. Indispensable. The German Social Democratic Party, which is now the Socialist Party of Germany, SDP, the Socialist Party in Germany, was the most powerful social democratic party. And between 1890 and 1914, they had over 200 daily newspapers. 200 daily newspapers, which went to trade union members, to women across Germany. So it meant that in those days, the real form that we used was media and, of course, mass meetings. Enormous amount of mass meetings and smaller meetings and so on. Lenin wrote a book called What Is to Be Done. And that book are very often derided. But one of the most important messages he gives you in that book is the possibility, the way in which a newspaper is used as an organizer. How when every one of us writes about our experience and what we see and how to do investigation and showing a policeman taking a bribe, showing someone being necklaced and so on, we do our own investigations on those things. And we all contribute to social media or to a newspaper. Then we all fall part of it and more people read it because there are many voices in it. So that's just the tradition of all of this. I see the Killers is much more interesting than this. And I prefer Bob Dylan though. And who is that one? I think it's great. All right.
1 minute.
1 minute. I just want to give you an example of TAC. In the early days of TAC, and I want to come back to the question of giving money. In the early days of TAC, we made posters that we cut out of newspapers and we put it up, and Dina and other people here will be able to tell you that. But we were the first organization in the country in the late 90s to use email as a newsletter. To use an email newsletter. To send out, every week, we send out an email newsletter. And so people, not only in South Africa, because what you must remember about the Arab revolutions and about HIV is that they created global communities, and Kony. They create global communities. They don't only create local communities, they also create global communities. So when you use your social media, you must understand that it goes beyond you. And through that, you're creating a community. And when TAC started, that's what we did. And he's not here, but Nathan Geffen set up our first website. And he took over the internet newsletter. But you'll never forget that TAC was a lot more than an internet newsletter and a great website. We also had songs that we sang. We developed a CD. We had our t-shirt, which is something we should have sold from day one. If we did that, 60 rand a t-shirt these days. You sell it, I hope. Okay, so I need to buy a new one. So we made our t-shirt. That t-shirt, my favorite HIV positive t-shirt is not one that was made in South Africa. It was one made in a place called Nepal, which is a small kingdom in the Himalayas, near India and all those funny places. And it was hand embroidered HIV positive and a picture of the world on it behind. Now it shows you the power of photographs, the power of social media, the power of the media. And today we face a very dangerous situation in South Africa. We face the Malemaization of our politics, where people think stupidly, they act stupidly, and it's not only Malema, it's also people who talk of us as refugees. And that means that there's a very dangerous discourse being created in our country which will divide people. And the danger is that a lot of that happens on the internet. In Talkback, on Facebook, you'll see the most horrible things. One of the biggest South African sites on pages on Facebook is the OSAID Africa, as an example. So what we need to look at is ways of bringing conversation to people that is knowledge-based, that shows how we can change society in a way that is positive, that gives people more knowledge, so that people don't only act on the emotion of Joseph Kony, but they act on the basis of the knowledge, which as Alex showed us very clearly, Joseph Kony, the story was gone. There was no knowledge behind it. there was a fake story, or not a fake story, a story that was very powerful, but 10 years late. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Zaki. We're going to open the floor now, and I think the best thing to do is to take 3 questions at a time, and you can direct your questions either to Alex or to Zaki. So, does anyone have a question? Got one in the back there.
There's 1, 2, 3.
I don't think it's a question I would like to have a clarity based on what is happening currently now in South Africa in terms of the security bill. So there is engagement around that, and there's caucus around that. I'm wondering about this social networks communication and how they're going to be monitored in terms of the CIA. Because I remember last time, and years back, there was the Machiavelli Commission. What happened to Machiavelli Commission? If now we're going to amend or adapt to the security bill, how it's going to influence the way we want to mobilize and organize on the ground. And in terms of this technology, how the issue is to global warming, because now we are facing a really weather patterns, we are facing a really crisis, so how do we look at the issue of coal, nuclear, and really in terms of marketing, does marketing also speculate or articulate the dangers of advertising like Geo, etc. Because we find out most of the workers, all the working class, are working in those factories. They are underpaid, and then at the end of the month, they can't even buy the money that they receive from the company that they're working for to buy the same production. So I just want to open up a debate like that so that we can see how the social mutual networks and also with the modern life that we live and how it should be to the global warming and also the other issues of sustainability.
Okay, thank you.
So let's take a few.
So is there any others? I saw some hands.
I just wanted to ask about access to information about the seminar. Like everything that's gone on here, basically
I can't hear. So can you hear the mic?
No, we can. Just a bit louder.
Oh, access to the information from the seminar. You can access it like the email or newsletter or something of that nature.
Okay. Yes.
I have a question. How would you? I guess it's to Alex. So Zaki was saying that Kony wasn't knowledge-based anymore. Or how do we build campaigns that are knowledge-based? But very clearly, what you said in your presentation, which has also been my experience as somebody who works in this space, is that most people make decisions on an emotional basis, not rational. So how would you reconcile those two things? And then secondly, how would you use that for campaigns? How would you apply that to the kinds of issues that we deal with, that people education might deal with or SJC might deal with?
Let's see if there are more. I think there were
some more. I know I saw. Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah, my question is.
Can we see you?
To Alex.
We can't see you.
I'm wondering how do you see us as organization to use social media? How impact can we play as organization on social media?
I meant to make this point, but we are a very efficient, the whole world is a very efficient communication system, and we've got papers and we've got blogs, and we're kind of pro at selling ideas and kind of creating propaganda and making it happen, but it wasn't always like that. And if you look at where communication developed and started, and by that I include graphic design, which is a part of our everyday life everywhere, it started with real causes. It started with revolutions, and it started with social issues. And back in the day, your artists and your activists worked together. This doesn't happen anymore. What's happened is that the artists have almost split from the activists, and we kind of we inhabit two opposite ends of our spectrum, where arts is something quite niche and cool and elitist, and activism is and superficial, and activism is something on the other side which is quite
boring.
It's boring. It's inaccessible, and it's yucky. I mean, like, the average person doesn't want to think about these issues because it's like it's too much and it's not packaged properly. So I would say to you, you need to find your artists again. You need to find your writers and your designers, and communication needs to become a priority. You know, in a business that sells shoes, your communications is an entire department, because they realize that if nobody understands what you're saying, they can't, and they won't buy your product. So find your artists is what I wanted to say. And then there was one other similar. I think for an organisation like this, you need to break down your messaging and package it, and you need to decide who you're going to be targeting with that message for. Now, if you were to go to university and study marketing, or study marketing anywhere, they would teach you these skills, but they wouldn't teach it to you in an activism sense. They wouldn't teach you how to package ideas that will change society and lives. They'll teach you how to package stuff. To sell stuff, yeah, to sell. I don't think there's a difference though. I mean, once you understand how to sell something, you know, you immediately add an advantage, because you understand how to communicate with people. And I think that's, I didn't know much about Indefuna Nkwazi or any of your organizations until I met Greg. And it's not because I think it's incredible. I think what you guys do is amazing, but it hasn't reached me. And you know, when I went and looked for it, it's beautifully written and it's beautifully packaged, but it hasn't yet been made accessible to a bigger market. And I think that's your challenge for any cause, is to find the relevance for a big market.
So I'll start off by saying that where Alex left off, that all our work and our messages can't reach thousands, they have to reach millions. And the way in which we do it is by cooperating. So there are a number of people here. All the ones on Facebook, put up your hand. Okay? All the ones on Mixit, put up your hands. Right? Now, there's an important thing. When I was an activist, and we still do it today, all of us. Well, I'm still an activist. But when I first was an activist, the most important way we communicated was with pamphlets, right? So just to get to Pupa quickly, I think that social media is an amazing way to stop trees being cut down. It's a really amazing way, because many more people can read stuff now without having to do it on paper. We do it very cheaply and in a form that is sustainable. So I think social media can be very important for a sustainable environment and communication program. Now, on the secrecy bill and the information bill and stuff like that, what can never happen again, and will never happen again, hopefully, unless we can make sure that it never happens again, is that information can be kept secret by governments. That will never happen again. Because everyone has a cell phone, if you see some politician doing something wrong, you can get it sent off to someone else, and to someone else, and to someone else. You can get it on the internet. And in Egypt they tried shutting the internet down for a couple of days. But why didn't it work? Because it then means the society can't work. It really means the society can't work. The capitalists can't do their business, because all business is done electronically. The banks can't work properly. This one can't work properly. That one can't work properly. And it's gone. So they can't shut down the internet. Or they can, but only at enormous cost to society. In Syria, we heard from an activist the other day here. An activist who went into Syria, helped get people medicines, helped get people stuff. And what we learned from him is they've shut in Homs and Hama and those places, they shut down the cell phone networks. But they can't stop people from getting satellite phones. And satellite phones you don't need MTN, Vodacom, and all those sorts of things for. The satellite exists outside your country. So, as far as secrecy and so on goes, the ANC securocrats can try as much as they like, but they're not going to be able to silence us. They're going to make it harder and more difficult, but they're not going to be able to silence us.
Just on the topic of secrecy, millions of people and huge big organizations with a lot of money have tried to shut down parts of the internet many times. The entire entertainment industry is up in arms because they can't stop piracy. And what happens is that, as soon as they do try and do it, there are people out there, and many of them, who see it as a game to work around that. And we have Anonymous. I don't know if you know about Anonymous. They're a massive organization online, and they
don't know each other.
Some of them know each other, but the point is that they don't operate with a face because they are the faceless mass. And whenever they've started to do kind of harmful things, like they will hack websites, they will release information. But the point that they make over and over again is that information belongs to people, and you cannot ever shut them down. China is a censored internet country. I don't know if we could ever get to that state though. It's such a, I think it's a long time before we ever get to a state where we are like China, but it's impossible to silence people on the internet. Good luck to anyone who tries.
But speaking so honestly, from the activist element or end in our social space, post something on the wall, then you're talking about something that's very radical or emotional or whatever. But you find that same activists, they're not respond to those things like that. But if you put a nice t-shirt, you tell loud. Everyone, oh, I like clothing, so I just want to understand that how that impact to indigenous language people that they have. It seems that people, when you communicate these days, they don't communicate in the way that information can flow. I can understand. I don't understand this NTY, so sometimes I get lost. There's a language in Facebook that I use. I don't use those things, but when I got in, then I find this kind of language. So don't you think the social networks also have a way of changing people the way they live? Or it's changing the language, everything that they're trying to suit. We know capitalism is there and it's making money and it's suit for the masses and the others to follow. But I'm trying to get the sense of this thing because even a TAC activist, you write something about what NHI, National Health Insurance, what is their take around that? What are the engagement? We try to engage people on those platforms, but we find out concrete. I'm not sure what is happening to them. Maybe their activism is away from the social, the economical issues, so I'm not sure, but how do we really improve, the communication and the way we speak? And when I came here, we find that people are sitting on Facebook or whatever, there's a lot of books here. So what is that? What do you think
You're allowed that. Another two questions, yes.
Okay, I like the point that we say that ANC will try to shut us down, and China is a censored country. But then there's also another bill which is called which they call General Intelligence Law bill. I don't know how far is it going to take us. How far is it going to take us? Because there are fears that bill is going to give the securocrats the power to go into our cell phones, into our emails, into the social media. Are we not going to end up as China?
So I get that, or I believe that if you try and start a movement, in social media, and it's not for the right reasons, you'll eventually be found out. So something similar to what happened to Coney. My question is, what if you try and start a movement with all the best intentions, and that community of people that are there just to latch on to your every success, to try and create success for themselves, and try and change your message purely for themselves? How do you manage those people to make sure that your message is still getting across?
Should we take one more round of questions?
I'm going to take your question.
Yes. Gavin, let's take another one.
Thanks, Greg. I think, thanks Alex for that presentation. When we're trying to get to the biggest possible market, I think you get to the risk of sensationalizing an issue. We saw that with Coney, we've seen it with other issues. And I mean, the last I heard of Coney was the founder running around naked in San Diego being arrested. And we haven't heard much about it since then. So I'm just interested to hear from you if you have any examples of social movements or organizations that have run successful campaigns that are sustainable. I mean, one that comes to mind personally is Avaaz, online petitioning site, which have done really, really amazing work for 2-3 years now. I mean, every time there's a petition out there, we get 5-6 million people to sign on.
And that's all they do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So I'm just interested to hear if there are any examples of organizations that have managed to build support continuously, but kind of sustain that support over time.
I'll answer yours quickly. And go and have a look at Give and Gain. They list almost every single NGO cause online, and there are examples of more sustainable ones. I think the Educate a Girl Child went viral online as well, and that wasn't really an ongoing campaign. It was more a thought that they wanted to get going. But yeah, you do raise the risk of sensationalizing. You get people who are good communicators in this world, and you get sensationalists. And just as there are journalists of integrity, and you've got to kind of err on the side of communicating with integrity as well. I mean, someone should have said, listen, Jason, just calm down. Can we actually have a reasonable discussion about this? But nobody ever did say that because he was completely in control of it. And shame, he became an overnight sensation, so he went mad. I always say there should be a course at school, which is what happens if you go viral on the internet, because it could happen to anyone. And then no skill, how do you deal with it? Shame, I feel sorry for him. Your question about how do you maintain a vision without other people leeching off your success, can you be a little more specific about what you mean by that? Do you mean other people using your cause to better their own image?
Yeah.
I think that's,
So for example, people latching onto you trending on Twitter, but using your hashtag to create their own business for themselves and that kind of thing.
Nobody's fooled by people like that. I think there's what gets said online, and then there's what doesn't get said, but people watch. And I think that you can't worry about that. I mean, if your idea and your organization has success and integrity, people will avoid the spam links. But if other people are going to help spread your thing as well, let them do it. There's statistics, something like 40% of people who are on Twitter don't actually interact; they just watch. And as someone who has a bit of a profile as well, sometimes people try and drag you into their stuff. They have these causes, and sometimes they're crazy, and then they kind of like at you in, and they hashtag you in, and they connect you, and they say that you said this and you said that. And what you could do is stand up and be like, actually tweet, I didn't, I have nothing to do with this person, and further their little ego trip. Or you can literally just say nothing and let other people watch what's happening and decide for themselves, because they're the ones making the fool of themselves. You don't have to defend yourself at every point.
You can see what a bad thing Twitter is, not what a bad, how people make fools of themselves by the way in which our Premier uses Twitter. You never. The example is never get involved in an argument on these things. On Facebook, it's fine because you can write more. You can write back and so on. But you cannot really explain yourself on Twitter. Twitter is just a way to share good pictures, good articles, and a one-liner. But never engage, because otherwise you drive yourself crazy and you drive the world crazy. So, so that's one thing I would say. But it is a difficult thing where people latch onto movements and so on. But you can't do. There's very little. The price we pay for freedom is that we have the good and the bad of freedom, and that's the price we pay for freedom. And that brings me back to things like the intelligence bill and so on. You know, there's such a bad group of bunch of legislation. I think one of the things that we should do is have a political seminar to discuss what is the meaning of having the traditional courts bill, the secrecy bill, the general laws amendment bill, because all these laws taken together form a plan. And I'm sure that there are more in the pipeline. And the internet can help us tweet about it. But if you believe that the ANC or the government is not listening into your conversations now, is not having access to our emails and all those things now, then you're living in a different world to the one I do. But what I can say to you is that they're trying to make that legal, and we have to stop them from making it legal, because it's our duty to do that. So, you know, I'm an enlightenment person. I believe technology can be good, and if it's used well. So, for me, I hate the fact that people can't speak English properly on Facebook. I'm talking about English native speakers. I'm not talking about people whose home language is not English. So when people have LOL, right? I sent a message once to someone's mum, to someone saying, sorry to hear your mom died, LOL. Like, you don't, and then, you know, like, laugh out loud. And after that, I never ever used one of those short things again. So to come back to how it changes our language and so on. The interesting thing for me that I'm seeing on Facebook is that people use Xhosa. For the first time in a public media space, people are using Xhosa in their status, in the stuff they post and so on. And I think that is a very exciting way of keeping languages alive that are under threat within our society. So it has both a good thing in that it allows, but there's also a bad thing that we all start becoming exactly the same. So that's my response to that. But I think it's overwhelmingly good.
So we can take two. It's 6:30 now. I think.
Yeah.
To close. Can I just take two questions? I've got two, Danny, second, and then should we close?
This is something that's always bothered me. Is in South Africa with the large socioeconomic gap, you kind of have two audiences you need to, get through to. Is that a problem from a complaints point of view, or do you need to deal with that in a certain way? Do you need to modify your message perhaps based on the audience you're trying to reach? Do you need to worry about that?
Exactly the same question.
Okay. Is there one more question then we want to take after that, or should we close with that question? Okay, let's close that question.
The last one. My last question would be for the house, not for you, government. It's for, do you think there's a need for alternative system than the one we're giving now?
Yes.
Which is?
I'll tell you when I answer.
Okay, I'm going to talk about markets. Does this need to be on? I cannot stress enough how important it is to really think about who you're talking to. You can never speak to everyone. You can never. you can have one primary target market and you can hope for a secondary. And depending on how influential that primary target market is, will determine your broader reach. So sometimes you do hit products that's, for Apple, for example, is an incredibly good product. It's elitist, but the majority of opinion leaders in the world use it. Hence, it doesn't need to kind of, really care about the lesser affluent markets per se, because it becomes aspirational. It becomes the thing that everyone who's successful uses. When we look at how we're going to form our communications, who we're talking to is, I can't even explain how much time we spend on this. A company like British American Tobacco, for example, which sells cigarettes, puts its entire marketing budget of, say, $25 million a year into consumer research and really understanding those people. I think that, to kind of throw a whole bunch of darts and hope that it hits as many people as you can is naive. It's so important. And if it does mean speaking in indigenous languages, because actually your job is more with people who do not speak English on an everyday basis, then make sure you get communications people in who understand that, and people who actually live, in the everyday lives of the people you're targeting.
Just very quickly, I mean, I agree with everything that Alex has said, that you speak to different audience, but they're messages which carry across everyone. So with the TAC message, for instance, that everyone has the right to life, there's not a person who could disagree with that except Thabo Mbeki and Manto Shabalala and all those people in the ANC who now suddenly have never been there. So there are messages that touches us all as human beings, and that brings me to the question that I don't think I responded to, about emotion versus knowledge. And I think the two things go together. It is the way in which one carries across a message. If a message only has anger in it, I'm not going to read it. I definitely don't. But if a message has an anger that shows that there's something to be angry about, but there's also in it an understanding of why you're angry and what to do to change it and what the issues are, then I'm going to listen to it. If a message, someone puts a picture up on my Facebook of a lost child, I get so irritated. Not because I don't believe it's not a cause, but I think, where are you when we actually need to have safe streets for our children? Do you put that onto your board? It doesn't mean that I don't want to hear about those things. So it's important to link those things in all the messages emotionally and so on. When it comes to the question of, and I just want to respond to Putla again from a previous question. He said there are lots of books here. Yes, there are lots of books, and we should read them, but this is a museum. This is a museum. It is not a living book. Books are going to live on the internet. Books are going to live on people's cell phones. Books are going to live on iPads and Kindles and those things. And is there anyone from Equal Education here? Yeah. But the main thing about that is that when we look at our schools today, we say classrooms with desks and stuff like that. No, our schools we need to have a different vision of what we want our schools to look like. We don't want our schools to look like they looked when our great-great-grandmothers were alive. We want our schools to look like when our great-grandchildren are going to be alive. That's what we need to look at. So technology is vital, and it can only be used when we change society. Access to everyone. And that change for me means, I'm a socialist, but I'm a socialist that believes that you can combine the good parts of capitalism, the parts of the market that work, the innovation, the research, the enterprise, and so on. But you also need the power of citizens, the power of people to keep companies under control and to keep governments under control and to make sure that people live decently. And that is what we have to use our social media for, and that is what we have to use our technology for.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. The purpose of today's seminar was to stimulate a debate around social media and how it can be used by NGOs like ourselves. And I think hopefully this conversation will continue, and we'll start discussing what platforms are available like Facebook and Twitter, and new platforms like Pinterest, which I'm especially fond of. And I'm fond of it because it's a way of reaching people through things that they're interested in. And I think one of the things that's come out of this discussion for me is that we need to think how we're going to communicate with our members, so people who are part of our organizations and at different levels. So if you've got an upper class and then a pro class, and whether we should be communicating one Mixit as opposed to Facebook, and where that leaves us and how we'd spend our money. So I'm a proponent of buying cell phones for members of organizations, and then perhaps developing apps in the future that you can use to communicate with your members. And that's one way to communicate. The next way to communicate is more vertical, and that's with people who want to come in and support or donate money. And I think what's come out of this debate for me is that there needs to be some sort of integrity when you are communicating your message to people outside of your organization, so it doesn't become sensationalist, and that's what Gavin picked up on. So I really want to thank both Zaki and Alex for spending this time here, and thank you to everyone who came through. Please check our website and take note of our other seminars that are coming up. The next one is...
Oh yes, the next one. Can I say something about the next one? The next one is a really great guy called Eddie Webster. He is one of the earliest activists of South Africa's labour movement and workers' movements. And it's going to take place here on the 23rd of April. And then the one after that is taking place in Khayelitsha, and it's Mzilikazi wa Afrika and Ferial Hafaji. And that is going to be on the state, money, and money, politics, and the state. And Mzilikazi wa Afrika, people will remember, was the journalist that Taylor had arrested because he exposed the leases on the police station. So we really should mobilize for both those things to get some really good people here, because Eddie Webster was at the beginning of stuff. Did I just take your speech? No. You see, Sipisa was, I didn't realize, they didn't tell me that Sipisa was, apart from handing over flowers. But this information is on the website.
We thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please join us for some drinks and snacks in the back. Thank you.
Thank you.